A soulmate is not sent to complete you. A soulmate is revealed to the part of you that no longer needs completing. Pause for a moment and let that settle into your awareness. It is a powerful reversal of everything the world teaches us about love. While many are chasing a person, the wise woman is preparing her presence. And it is often in the stillness, when you've stopped searching, stopped forcing, stopped performing, that God gently brings someone into your life. Not with noise, but with quiet certainty. In this stillness, you are no longer hunting love, you are becoming love. And from that place, you don't chase your soulmate, you recognize them. A woman once asked an old monk, "How will I know when I've met the right person?" The monk, silent for a while, finally answered, "When you are no longer needing them to fix what you refuse to heal." And this, although simple, is deeply powerful. Because before love arrives from outside, something profound must awaken from within. In the ancient Shaolin tradition, there is a quiet law that governs connection first. You must become what you seek. You must embody the qualities you long to receive, and not in a performative way, but in an honest, integrated manner. This is the essence of vibrational match. The first way God introduces you to your soulmate without you realizing. It is not a coincidence that people who carry inner peace often find partners who respect their emotional space, nor is it accidental that individuals who carry unresolved chaos tend to draw relationships that mirror that very same instability. Energy precedes interaction. What you emit, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, is what you naturally attract. This is not about blame. It is about awareness. From a neuroscience perspective, the brain is designed to perceive and respond to familiarity. Mirror neurons, for instance, are the basis for empathy and social resonance. They allow us to pick up on the emotional signals of those around us, often without words. This is why we feel calm in the presence of a grounded person, and restless in the presence of someone who is internally fragmented. Without realizing it, your nervous system is constantly scanning the world for patterns that match your internal rhythm. And here's the powerful truth: when your rhythm is anxious, wounded, or desperate, you unconsciously find familiarity in people who mirror that pattern back to you, even if it hurts. This is why the journey to your soulmate begins long before you ever meet them. It begins in your energy, in your habits, in your thoughts at night, in the way you speak to yourself, in your relationship with stillness. One woman shared her story of constant heartbreak. She said, "Every man I meet ends up taking me for granted. I show up, I give everything, and somehow I still end up feeling invisible." Upon deeper reflection, she began to recognize that her pattern of overgiving was not rooted in love, but in fear, a fear that she wasn't enough as she was. So she used care as a currency to buy worth. But that energy, although subtle, was felt, and the men she attracted responded not to her generosity, but to her hidden insecurity. When she began to do the inner work, developing a quiet confidence, learning to sit with her own discomfort instead of fleeing into another person's arms, something shifted. She began to show up differently. Not louder, not harder, just clearer, softer in energy, but firmer in boundary. And it was during a quiet, uneventful season that she met a man who didn't just admire her light, but who was anchored in his own. There was no chase, no high drama, just recognition. This is vibrational match in action. In Eastern philosophy, it is said that the flower does not chase the bee. It simply blooms, and the right one comes. Likewise, a woman grounded in her essence does not need to perform, convince, or prove. Her presence speaks louder than her words. Her energy introduces her long before she utters a sentence. There is something sacred about a woman who has done her inner work. She is not looking to be rescued. She does not idolize love as a way out of loneliness. She honors solitude as sacred preparation. And because of this, when her soulmate appears, the connection feels like an alignment, not an escape. You must ask yourself, what version of you will meet your soulmate? Not the one projected on social media, not the one dressed up to impress, but the version of you that shows up when no one is watching, when life is quiet, when the lights are off, when the mask is removed. That is the frequency from which your true connections are born. Every person vibrates at a certain emotional frequency, and these frequencies are not hidden, they're embodied. A woman who walks in peace, who knows how to sit with silence, who does not demand but receives, is sending signals that she's emotionally available for a high-value connection. On the other hand, when your energy is tense, clingy, or desperate, often born from unmet emotional wounds, you unconsciously attract people who feed on that kind of disconnection. The goal is not to become perfect. The goal is to become aware. When God is preparing you for your soulmate, He's not just working on your external circumstances. He's realigning your energy, refining your discernment, and teaching you to stop chasing shadows and start cultivating presence. You'll begin to notice this shift when the same people who once excited you begin to feel draining. When the conversations you used to tolerate now feel hollow. When your spirit starts rejecting anything that doesn't mirror the peace you've worked to create inside. This is the first sign that you're approaching vibrational alignment. It's subtle, but it's real. And this brings us to the second way God introduces you to your soulmate without you realizing, through hidden alignments and divine timing, delivered in the most ordinary of rhythms. Sometimes, the hand of God is not revealed in lightning bolts or loud epiphanies. Sometimes it arrives gently, through interrupted plans, unexpected pauses, and the very situations you tried to avoid. A woman may be delayed on her way to work and meet a stranger in a quiet coffee shop. A man might be moved to take a different route home and find himself in a bookstore, drawn into conversation. These are not coincidences. They are appointments. And the more present you become, the more you recognize them. Hidden alignments occur when life reroutes you for something deeper than your understanding. When God introduces your soulmate, He often does so through the very path you resisted. A heartbreak that shattered your illusions. A job you lost that forced you to move cities. A season of solitude that felt like punishment but was actually preparation. In psychology, this is connected to the principle of cognitive reframing, the ability to reinterpret events in ways that reveal meaning rather than just pain. When you shift your interpretation of a detour, you begin to see how what was once perceived as delay was actually divine choreography. A woman once shared how she met her partner during what she called the worst year of her life. She had lost her father, ended a long-term relationship, and moved to a new city for work. She described that year as a season of deep grief and emotional exhaustion. And yet, it was in that very city, during a silent walk in the park, that she met someone who would later become her husband. "I didn't go looking," she said. "I was barely even able to receive anything. But somehow he met me in my rawness, not because I was whole, but because I was real." This is how divine timing often appears. Not when we're ready by our standards, but when we're real by life's standards. Eastern wisdom reminds us that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. In relationships, the same applies when your spirit is receptive, the right presence enters. Not to teach you who you are, but to remind you of what you've been becoming all along. Hidden alignments are also supported by physiological readiness. When the nervous system is overactivated, driven by fear, scarcity, or desperation, it cannot perceive subtle cues of connection. You may miss the right person not because they're absent, but because your body is in a state of chronic vigilance. It takes stillness to perceive grace. It takes inner calm to feel resonance. Many women ask, "Why am I not meeting anyone aligned?" The answer often lies not in the absence of potential partners, but in the absence of inner attunement. If your days are consumed with noise, mental, emotional, digital, you will miss the whisper of divine appointment. You must learn to listen beyond the noise, to sense when something is shifting, not externally, but internally. To trust your body when it relaxes in someone's presence. To notice the doors that close and not chase them. To let go of what is familiar so you can receive what is fated. Divine timing often feels inconvenient, but it is never late. It may arrive through an invitation you almost declined, through a conversation you didn't plan, through a person you never expected to see again. That is the quiet genius of God's design. He hides extraordinary moments in ordinary packages, so that only those who are present enough will recognize their sacredness. And so, the woman who will meet her soulmate without even realizing it is the one who walks slowly, who listens deeply, who trusts her inner knowing more than external pressure. She is not desperate for a timeline. She does not chase prophetic signs. She remains open but grounded, available but not attached. She knows that her job is not to manipulate timing, but to become the kind of person who moves with it. When the rhythm of your life begins to flow with grace, when your breath slows and your awareness sharpens, something ancient begins to activate in you. You begin to walk not just through time, but through alignment. And this is when your paths intersect. This is when two lives, once strangers, are suddenly moving in the same direction. Not because they planned it, but because they were prepared for it. So often, women wait for love to awaken them. But the deeper truth is this awakening prepares you for love. And when you finally arrive in the right moment, with the right presence, in the right rhythm, God will not need to shout. The recognition will be quiet, but it will be undeniable. There is a quiet kind of suffering that few speak of, a suffering that lives in the hearts of those who have given themselves fully in love, only to feel unseen, unheard, and misunderstood. And many women carry this burden with silence. They ask themselves, why does love feel so far away, even when I'm surrounded by people? The answer, often, is hidden not in what you lack, but in what you've not yet seen about yourself. One of the most overlooked ways God introduces you to your soulmate, without you realizing, is through the mirror of contrast. By allowing you to encounter the wrong ones, first, not to punish you, but to prepare you. These relationships are not accidents, they are divine awakeners. They come into your life to show you where you are still disconnected from yourself, where you still settle, where you still mistake chemistry for compatibility and attachment for love. In Eastern teaching, contrast is the way the Tao reveals harmony. You only appreciate peace after tasting chaos. You only value depth after experiencing emptiness. Similarly, you come to recognize your soulmate by first encountering what your soul cannot align with. It is through the wrong loves that you begin to refine your inner compass. Neuroscience supports this through the concept of pattern recognition. The human brain is wired to seek familiarity, but it can also learn through repeated contrast. When you date someone who manipulates, then someone who's emotionally unavailable, then someone who ghosts you, your subconscious is forced to compare. At some point, if you are awake, you begin to recognize the common denominator, not just the kind of people you've chosen, but the energy in you that allowed those choices. There was a woman who once fell in love with a man who could not love her back. He was charming, attentive in public, but cold and dismissive when no one was watching. She stayed for years, believing that her love could eventually teach him how to love. But time passed and her spirit withered. She said, "I lost my glow. I lost my voice. I thought I was loyal, but I was just afraid to start again." When she finally walked away, it wasn't because she stopped loving him. It was because she started remembering herself. The pain of that relationship became her mirror. Not because he changed, but because she did. This is how God uses contrast. It's never just about the person. It's about the reflection they trigger in you. Sometimes, it is only after being unseen that you learn how to see yourself. It is only after being abandoned that you learn the importance of staying rooted in your own soul. Contrast has another purpose. It sharpens your discernment. You begin to notice what your spirit reacts to. You start to feel when someone's words don't match their energy. You stop excusing red flags. You become more sensitive, not in a fragile way, but in a spiritually intelligent way. Psychologically, this is known as interoception. The ability to read internal signals from the body. The more aware you are of your bodily responses, the better you can detect whether a person is activating your peace or your survival mode. So when you meet someone and feel a quiet nervousness, an anxious excitement mistaken for attraction, you pause. You check in with your nervous system. You listen. And over time, your body becomes the gateway to truth, not your fantasies. Contrast also reveals your thresholds. What you used to tolerate now becomes intolerable. What you used to crave, you now see clearly. That validation you once chased, you realize it was just a temporary fix for a deeper self-worth wound. And suddenly, the way you love changes. You stop begging, you stop bargaining. You begin to hold yourself differently. There was a man who said to a woman, "You're too much, too intense, too emotional." She spent years shrinking herself to fit into his world. But after the relationship ended and she began her healing, she met someone who said, "Your depth is beautiful. Your intensity makes me feel alive." That was the contrast. The same qualities that repelled the wrong one became sacred in the presence of the right one. When God brings contrast into your life, He's not being cruel. He's allowing you to shed illusions. He's teaching you how to trust your own reflection. Because when your soulmate arrives, you will recognize them not through fireworks, but through resonance. And resonance only happens when your spirit is no longer confused by dysfunction. You begin to crave simplicity. Not in a boring way, but in a peaceful way. The loud passion that left you drained no longer appeals to you. Now, you want someone who makes your nervous system exhale. Someone whose presence doesn't confuse you, but confirms you. That's how contrast works. It detoxes your emotional palate, so you can finally taste what's pure. And this brings us to the fourth way God introduces your soulmate, without you realizing, through deep inner nudges and synchronicities that transcend logic. There are moments in life that seem ordinary until you look back and realize they were divine. A random conversation that shifts your perspective. A dream that lingers longer than it should. A feeling you get around someone that defies explanation. These are not to be ignored. They are whispers from a higher intelligence, guiding you toward alignment. But to perceive them, you must cultivate inner quiet. Eastern philosophy teaches that intuition is like still water. It only reflects truth when it is undisturbed. In our modern world, filled with noise, distraction, and overstimulation, the voice of intuition is often drowned out by the voice of fear. And yet, it is this inner knowing that often leads you directly into the arms of the person your soul has been prepared for. From a psychological standpoint, intuition is not mystical. It is neurobiological. It is the brain's ability to synthesize vast amounts of unconscious data collected from your experiences, body language, and emotional cues. This is why you can walk into a room and feel tension before a word is spoken. This is why you can meet someone and feel like you've known them. There is a quiet paradox that governs many of life's most sacred experiences, especially love. The more you seek something out of desperation, the more it seems to retreat from you. The more you grasp at it, the more elusive it becomes. And yet, when you release the attachment, when you no longer demand it to fill a void inside of you, that very thing appears, not because you chased it, but because you became aligned with it. This is the mystery of inner stillness, and it is in this stillness that God often introduces us to our soulmate. In the teachings of Eastern philosophy, there is a concept that can be traced through various paths of wisdom. Non-seeking is the highest form of readiness. This doesn't mean that you stop participating in life or hide away from the world. It means your inner posture shifts. You are no longer defined by your longing. You are no longer dominated by the emotional hunger to be chosen. And in that sacred space, when your identity is not rooted in another's presence or approval, your energy softens, your heart opens, and your vision clears. You become ready without reaching. This stillness is not passive. It is power in its most refined form. Think of a mountain, immovable, silent, yet completely present. Everything around it, wind, water, weather, may change, but the mountain remains steady. When you reach this inner state as a woman, you become that mountain, grounded in your essence, whole, unshaken by the rush of timelines or the noise of societal expectations. It is from this place that your energy begins to draw in what is meant for you, not through force, but through resonance. One woman shared a story with me once. For many years, she pursued love with the urgency of someone drowning. Every date was laced with a question: is this him? Every silence was a wound. Every rejection felt like a reflection of her value. She tried everything: books, coaches, even scripting affirmations. But nothing lasted. Each man that entered her life reflected back her own inner turbulence. She was always chasing, always trying to prove she was worthy of love. Until one day, something changed. It wasn't a grand moment. It came in the middle of a quiet morning, as she drank tea by herself. She looked around her apartment and noticed how peaceful it felt. There was no one there. No text messages coming in. No promises to distract her. Just herself, her breath, her stillness. And for the first time, she didn't feel alone. She felt whole. In that stillness, something broke open. The need to be chosen dissolved. She realized that the love she had been searching for was a mirror of the love she was finally offering herself. Within a few months, she met a man in the most ordinary of places, a library. Their conversation began not from need, but from peace. And now, years later, they are still together, not as two halves completing each other, but as two whole beings walking beside each other. The world has conditioned many women to believe that love must be pursued aggressively, that one must market herself, be constantly visible, and assert herself into the attention of others. While there is nothing wrong with presence or confidence, desperation distorts energy. When your heart is filled with seeking, it cannot truly receive. Seeking, in its shadow form, becomes a disguise for fear. The fear of being alone, the fear of being unworthy, the fear that time is running out. But fear is not a fertile ground for sacred connection. Stillness is. There is a physiological truth that supports this spiritual insight. The human nervous system is designed to detect safety, calm, and resonance. When you are in a dysregulated state, stressed, anxious, or seeking validation, your body is actually emitting signals that reflect that unrest. People can sense it. They may not know what they're sensing, but they feel it. This is what neuroscience calls neuroception, an unconscious detection of safety or threat in others. Now consider what happens when your nervous system is calm, regulated, and content. That calm becomes magnetic. People feel safe around you. They feel drawn to you without knowing why. This is not charisma in the conventional sense, it is presence. So often, the very thing we chase is repelled by the energy we're using to chase it. Love is not something you catch. It is something you awaken to, and awakening requires stillness. When you are still, you begin to notice the signs, the patterns, the nudges from life that were always there, but obscured by your own noise. You notice the person who holds the door and looks at you with steady eyes. You hear the softness in someone's voice when they ask about your day. You become aware of how you feel in someone's presence, not from fantasy, but from embodiment. And from this awareness, recognition arises. In the Tao Te Ching, one of the most profound lines states, "When the student is ready, the teacher appears." In the realm of love, it could be said, "When the soul is ready, the mirror appears." Your soulmate is not found by rushing into experiences or swiping endlessly through profiles with growing disillusionment. Your soulmate is revealed through your stillness. When you have become a clear enough vessel to see not with eyes of desperation, but with eyes of discernment. There is another story I once heard from a woman in her early 50s. After a long marriage that ended painfully, she found herself alone, her children grown, her identity fractured. At first, she tried to get back out there. As her friends encouraged, she joined dating apps, went on blind dates, bought new clothes, dyed her hair. But something felt hollow. It wasn't that the men were unworthy. It was that she was still fragmented. She was still trying to skip the sacred work of healing. So she stopped. She began to walk by the river each morning. She wrote in a journal. She sat with her pain. Instead of trying to erase it, she began practicing Qigong. She moved slower. She listened more. She became intimate with herself. It was during one of these walks, while sitting under a tree in a quiet park, that a man approached her, not with an agenda, but with presence. He asked her about the book she was reading. They spoke for 20 minutes. The next day, they met again and again. There were no games, no masks, no performance. Just stillness meeting stillness. She told me once that he didn't feel like a lightning bolt. He felt like a warm fire. The kind you sit beside for hours, never wanting to leave. That's what true resonance feels like. It's not overwhelming, it's grounding. From a spiritual perspective, this stillness is a form of divine cooperation. You are saying to the universe, I trust your timing. I trust your way. I trust that what is for me cannot miss me, and what is not for me will not stay. That kind of trust makes you less anxious and more aligned. It frees you from the constant calculation of who you must become in order to be loved. And in that freedom, love flows naturally. Practically speaking, cultivating stillness in your daily life doesn't require isolation. It means practicing being before doing. It means spending moments with yourself without distraction. No phone, no scrolling, no noise. It means observing your thoughts without attaching to them. It means breathing slowly before reacting. It means creating space between your impulse to act and your decision to respond. All of this begins to regulate your nervous system and awaken your intuition. When a woman becomes still, her clarity sharpens. She no longer entertains situations that drain her, because she is no longer trying to earn love through suffering. She no longer overextends herself, because she recognizes that genuine connection requires mutual effort. She no longer chases mixed signals, because she understands that peace is the new standard for intimacy. And with this clarity, she starts to recognize who belongs in her life, not based on chemistry, but on alignment. There is also a beautiful principle in both Eastern philosophy and Christian mysticism, the concept of the inner sanctuary. It is believed that every human being has a sacred space within them, a place where the divine speaks, not in loud declarations, but in gentle whispers. To access that space, one must become quiet, still, undistracted. It is there that the deepest wisdom arises. It is there that you begin to hear the subtle voice that says, "This is right." Or perhaps, "This is not for you." But if your life is filled with noise, your heart becomes deaf. So many women move through relationships on autopilot, trying to make things work that are not meant to, clinging to potential instead of presence, fearing loneliness more than disconnection. But stillness reintroduces you to yourself. It reminds you that your time is sacred. Your energy is sacred. Your body is sacred. And once you truly know this, your standards are no longer negotiable. Not out of arrogance, but out of awareness. In stillness, you begin to reframe your questions. Instead of, "Where is my soulmate?" you begin to ask, "Who am I becoming?" Instead of, "When will someone love me?" you ask, "How deeply am I willing to love myself without condition?" These questions don't just shift your mindset, they shift your frequency. And when your frequency changes, so does your field of attraction. You no longer draw in those who feed off your wounds. You begin to attract those who honor your wholeness. The journey into stillness is not easy. It requires unlearning. It requires sitting in the discomfort of not knowing. It requires letting go of the urge to control outcomes. But the fruit of that journey is profound. Stillness is where your intuition speaks, your vision clears, your past integrates, and your heart prepares. It is where you stop being available to anything less than what your soul has asked for in secret. There is a final story I will offer. A woman in her early 60s, widowed young, had resigned herself to a life of solitude. She was content in her routines, her garden, her books. She had no expectation of romantic connection. One evening, during a meditation retreat, she sat silently across from another participant. They exchanged no words, just presence, breath, awareness. At the end of the retreat, they spoke, slowly, gently. Over time, friendship blossomed into companionship. It was not the wild romance of youth. It was deeper. It was the love that comes when two people have cultivated enough stillness to truly see each other. Not through projection, but through presence. And perhaps that is what all true love is. A meeting of two presences, each whole in themselves, each still enough to notice the sacred in the other. When a woman reaches this level of being, she does not need to chase love. She simply walks in her truth. And in that walking, God introduces her to the one who can meet her there. There comes a time in a woman's life when she must recognize that her heart is not a door for anyone who merely knocks loud enough. It is, instead, a sacred temple, one that only opens for those who approach it with reverence, patience, and the wisdom to understand that love is not a convenience, but a commitment. Key point 6 reveals one of the most overlooked ways God introduces a woman to her soulmate through her elevation. When she elevates her standards, her self-awareness, her frequency, she rises above the noise of false connection, and in that elevated space, her soulmate appears. Elevation is not about becoming superior. It is about becoming aligned with your truest self. And this alignment changes everything. Many women wonder why the same kind of emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, or immature partners keep showing up in their lives. But the question is not why they show up. The question is, why do they keep getting access? The answer lies in the frequency from which a woman operates. When she is stuck in self-doubt, scarcity, or emotional fatigue, she vibrates at a level that attracts those who confirm that state. But the moment she begins to elevate, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, she no longer operates at the same frequency. She becomes unreachable to the ones who once found easy entry. There's a powerful parable told in many traditions about a woman who climbs a mountain not to conquer it, but to meet herself at the summit. Along the way, she sheds layers, Old beliefs, societal expectations, wounds she mistook for her personality. With each step, her breath deepens, her vision sharpens, and when she reaches the top, she doesn't find another person waiting. She finds herself. But in that sacred moment of self-recognition, the mountain echoes with a presence. Another climber appears, not one who was carried there, but one who climbed as she did, with effort, with humility, with grace. They meet, not because they searched for each other, but because they both chose to rise. Elevation, in this context, means taking radical responsibility for your internal state. It means no longer blaming past lovers, absent fathers, or societal narratives for your pain. Yes, those things hurt. Yes, they shape your perspective. But your healing is your responsibility. And healing is the first act of elevation. When you stop using your past as a blueprint for your future, you begin to carve a new path. One where your worth is not measured by someone's willingness to choose you, but by your willingness to choose yourself, again and again. A woman once told me that for most of her 20s and 30s, she lived in fear of being alone. This fear made her say yes to things she didn't want, stay in relationships that drained her, and shrink herself to fit into someone else's world. She thought that love required sacrifice, and that the more she gave up for a man, the more valuable she would become in his eyes. But it never worked. The more she gave, the more they took. The more she waited, the more she was delayed. One day, after another painful ending, she stood in front of the mirror and asked a different question. Not, what's wrong with me? But, what have I accepted as normal that is actually self-abandonment? That question changed her life. She stopped dating for validation and started dating herself, buying herself flowers, taking herself on trips, listening to her needs. She learned to say no without guilt and yes without fear. She stopped trying to impress anyone and started to impress herself. Over time, her energy shifted. She no longer tolerated ambiguity. She stopped explaining her worth to people who couldn't see it. And soon enough, the type of men who used to pursue her faded away, not because she was hiding, but because she was no longer within reach. Instead, a new kind of man entered her life, a man who respected her time, cherished her presence, and showed up consistently. He didn't complete her, he matched her. Because she had elevated, he could now meet her where she stood. Shi Heng Yi once said, "Discipline is the bridge between intention and manifestation." When you elevate, you are no longer led by emotion alone. You are guided by intention, and that requires discipline. It's easy to say you want a conscious, emotionally intelligent partner, but are you becoming the kind of woman that such a man would be drawn to? Are you clear about your boundaries, consistent with your self-respect, and committed to your inner growth? If not, you are still operating from the realm of desire, not elevation. Elevation means you act as if what you desire is already present, so you align with it now, not later. Elevation also means being willing to let go of what you used to think love looked like. Sometimes, the biggest obstacle between a woman and her soulmate is the outdated version of love she refuses to release. She's still chasing a fantasy shaped by childhood dreams, romantic movies, or broken examples from her environment. She wants chemistry without compatibility. She wants passion without peace. But true love, the kind that lasts, is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, soft, steady. If you are addicted to chaos, peace will feel boring. But when you elevate, your nervous system begins to heal. And when it heals, it begins to crave what is healthy, not what is familiar. This is why God often introduces your soulmate only after you've outgrown who you used to be. Not because you weren't worthy before, but because you weren't yet ready to recognize or sustain that level of connection. Just as a mountain climber can only breathe easily at higher altitudes once they've acclimated, your soul must be prepared to handle the depth, safety, and intimacy of divine love. And that preparation happens through elevation. Imagine two frequencies on a radio dial. One is crackling with static, full of noise, disconnection, and old programs. The other is clear, strong, and tuned to divine alignment. You cannot receive what's on the second frequency if you refuse to move your dial. Elevation is the movement. You start by asking better questions. Not, why doesn't he love me? But, why am I tolerating this? Not, what can I do to make him stay? But, what do I lose by making space for someone who can't see me? These questions aren't comfortable, but they are catalytic. They spark awareness. And awareness is the seed of transformation. There's another story I recall, this one from a woman who had spent years repeating the same relational patterns. Each man entered with grand gestures, promises of forever, only to exit with excuses. She began to think something was wrong with her. But then she decided to spend a year in solitude, not isolation, but intentional solitude. She took up meditation, practiced silence, and studied spiritual texts. She journaled every day. She confronted the shadow parts of herself. The part that feared abandonment, the part that equated attention with love, the part that performed to be accepted. As the months passed, something miraculous occurred. Not in her outer world, but within. She began to enjoy her own company. She became her own emotional anchor. She stopped craving constant communication or reassurance. She became comfortable in silence. And then, in the most ordinary moment, while volunteering at a community garden, she met someone. He was kind, grounded, and deeply self-aware. Their connection wasn't a high, it was a homecoming. They both had elevated. And now they could walk together without pulling each other down. Elevation refines your discernment. When you are low in frequency, even red flags can look like roses. But when you rise, you see clearly. You no longer mistake charm for character, effort for intention, or attraction for alignment. You begin to value peace over performance, consistency over chemistry, depth over drama. And that shift in values transforms the way you choose. You stop asking, does he like me? And start asking, does he nourish me? That is elevation. But elevation also means solitude. There are seasons when God will hide you, not to punish you, but to prepare you. He removes distractions, closes doors, and silences noise, so you can hear his voice more clearly, so you can heal without interference, so you can rise without comparison. These seasons may feel empty, but they are sacred. The woman who honors these quiet seasons will emerge with a strength that is not loud but unshakable. In Buddhist tradition, there is a saying, when you realize how perfect everything is, you will tilt your head back and laugh at the sky. But that realization only comes when you stop trying to force life into your timeline and start flowing with divine rhythm. Elevation means you stop rushing, you stop comparing, you stop trying to earn what is already yours. You understand that what is aligned with your soul cannot miss you, so you prepare. You rise, you become. And perhaps this is what love truly is, not a destination, but a mirror, a reflection of the love you have cultivated within yourself. The soulmate you seek is not a rescuer, not a missing piece, but a partner on the path, someone who recognizes your light because they have seen their own. Someone who doesn't compete with your elevation, but complements it. Someone who honors your standards, not because they have to, but because they operate from the same frequency. The truth is, not everyone is meant to join you at your highest level. Some were only meant for a previous version of you, and that's okay. Let them go. Elevation is lonely only at first, but soon you realize that the higher you rise, the more clearly you can see. You begin to live from the mountaintop, not because you're above others, but because you've chosen clarity over comfort. And from that place, you will see him, not the one you imagined, but the one who has also risen, the one who honors your path because he's walked his own, the one who doesn't just say, I love you, but who speaks it through presence, protection, patience. God introduces your soulmate through your elevation because he knows that sacred union cannot be built on shaky ground. It must be built on the rock of self-awareness, the soil of healing, the foundation of integrity. So he calls you to rise, not so you can find him, but so you can become the woman who can recognize, receive, and walk beside him. When we look at how God introduces a woman to her soulmate, it's never in the way the world teaches, through chasing, striving, or settling. Instead, it's in the quiet moments of alignment, the brave acts of self-respect, the sacred pauses of healing, and the courageous choice to elevate. Your soulmate is not found in the noise of desperation, but revealed in the clarity of self-awareness. He is not summoned by loneliness but by wholeness. He is not drawn to your wounds but to your wisdom. Every moment you spend learning how to sit with yourself, honor your spirit, and walk away from what diminishes you, you are not delaying love. You are preparing for the version of love that mirrors your highest self. This journey is not about finding someone to complete you. It is about becoming someone who no longer abandons herself. It is about realizing that the love you desire is already forming at the level where your soul is being called to rise. So listen to that call. Honor the process. Trust the divine timing. Because when you become the woman who has healed, elevated, and learned how to protect her peace, your soulmate will not be late. He will be right on time. Because your paths were never meant to cross in your brokenness, but to meet in your becoming.